Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. A couple of little housekeeping issues. First and foremost,
This
sadly,
call may
Scott.
be recorded for note-taking and coaching purposes.
Oh, come on, whoever that is. They're done out. So, but anyway, we're going to let you know that Scott is unfortunately able to be with us today. His son is actually at a pretty serious doctor appointment. He's fine. He hurt his arm, but that's where that's where he's at. So he won't be with us in the moment. With that being said, we've got a really small group, which I like because I think you guys are all going to enjoy hearing what Tony has to say. And he's got such a wealth of knowledge. So I'm going to leave it there. I first need to thank our sponsors, which are Vidyard, Salesforce for Sales, Outreach.io, and Reggie.ai. We really appreciate everything they're doing, particularly with Outreach. They've got some major announcements coming out, actually starting yesterday and today. So please be sure to check them out as they've got some new updates that I think it's going to blow some people's minds. It's pretty cool. So anyway, I'm not even going to try to introduce Tony Hughes. I'm just going to say it's Tony Hughes. Tony, would love for you to actually introduce yourself. Pimp all the books you've written, talk about what you've done. This is your shot and your show. So thanks for joining us.
Hey, Richard, thanks for having me on. Sorry, Scott can't be with us today. It was really funny. I was talking to a CEO of a telco about 2 weeks ago, and it was just the final step in that telco taking me on board, and also Luigi Prestonenzi, my co-founder at Sales IQ, to go and work with their big organization. And someone mentioned on the call that I've published 3 books. And the first thing that came into his mind, you could see it going through his head, was, okay, but have you ever done anything in the real world? So he sort of said, so are you one of these authors? And I said, no, it's all okay. I've run the Asia Pacific region for North American multinationals. So I've been in your role. I've set records as a salesperson that have never been broken. So I'm a 35-year veteran of actually doing this in the trenches. I'm definitely not a theorist. So and that's where I think most people will really get the value. And I'm really happy for anybody to challenge the things that we talk about today. So
I love it too. I don't. We neither of us are the kind of person who wants to say we know it all. We want to learn from everybody.
No.
So, if you're familiar with how we do things, first thing I would love for people to do is go into the chat and just tell us where you're dialing in from. It's always cool to see where that's happening and where people are coming from. The other thing I'm going to put in the chat is the actual original registration page. And the reason it's there is that at the bottom under the registration, there's a worksheet. And in that worksheet, it's digital. You can fill it in. It gives you the opportunity to capture your 3 notes, what your actual action items are. It's great to come and listen to something like me and Tony, but we want you to leave with something to do. And so we want to try and help you and empower you to do that. So that's at the bottom of that link. So thanks everybody for coming and showing up. So we're here to talk about de-risking your pipeline, right? This was a great topic when I was talking to Tony to set this up. So Tony, at a high level, before we get into the details, my theory has always been, look, if you've got a deal in your pipeline and it's more than double your average sales cycle, if your sales cycle is 30 days and it's in there 60, if it's 90 days, 180, you have to kill it. You kill it. Now, there's one exception. If you can go to the Vatican and get a note from the Pope, I'll let you keep it in the pipeline. And look, I say this as a nice Jewish kid, so it's not to pick on any particular religion. Maybe you can go to talk to my mom, my nice Jewish mother, and convince her otherwise. But what do you talk about de-risking? What are, just at a high level, what are those things that you can immediately see that say, oh, this is really at risk?
So maybe just a couple of things. We all know that between opening and closing is the middle, and the middle is where deals go to die. And the most important phase of selling is not closing, it's opening. Because if we don't open a deal the right way, the probability of doing great discovery, gathering consensus, securing political alignment, nailing the business case for change, creating positive bias for us and against competition. The reality is we don't get to do all of those things if we don't open strongly. So we'll sort of come back to that at the end, but between opening and closing is the middle. It's often where deals stall and die. And what we know is that deals getting stuck in stage is a huge red flag. So I agree with you about overall cycle time, but we should also think about our sales stages, which should align with buyer's journey, so align our selling process with their buying process and think about stages. And we should know what the average time is for a deal in stage. So they definitely think red flags for deals getting stuck in stage.
Yep, I completely agree. I've been push back on me on this one. Like I've sort of been throwing out this theory that it's not about the buyer's journey. It's about the buyer's experience. You don't go to a new restaurant and say, hey, how was your journey? Let me tell you about my journey. You want to tell, it's like, well, how was your experience there? Right. Like, agree, disagree. Like, what do you think?
Well, I partially agree. So I agree that the biggest single point of differentiation in winning the deal is the experience that the buying organization has in engaging us, right? So we absolutely know that it's more than 50% of decision weighting is the experience that they have. Less than 10% is price, less than 40% is our brand and the attributes of what we sell. So the experiences we create is incredibly important, and we won't dive down this rat hole, but one of the things that I predict along with Justin Michael in the new book, Tech-Powered Sales, is that in this decade, there will be 30, maybe a third less field sellers in the world at the end of this decade.
Oh yeah.
Because buyers are looking for the right kind of experience, and they don't want human beings involved in the process if they don't provide any level of value for them. So I definitely agree that the experience we create is really important. But if we're looking about de-risking deals, getting a more accurate forecast, avoiding deals slipping and stalling, process is actually critically important. We need to understand their evaluation, selection, procurement, contracting process and align with it. And deals can take longer than normal and still be okay if there's a good reason for it, right? So if we're doing a big deal, it's above the normal person's approval thresholds. They may have budget, but then they've got to go and put a business case back up to get that budget released so they can actually buy. If there's key stakeholders they need to get on board, if there's a good reason for things happening, then that's okay. The issue is deal momentum.
Yep.
And there's a lot of thinking out there around qualifying deals. We have to qualify the prospect. And I agree as a seller that it's irresponsible of us to waste our precious time and our organization's resources on poorly qualified deals. But here's the interesting thing. No buyer likes to be qualified by a seller. They hate people doing that to them. Yeah. So in my view, rather than our BANT, MEDIC, TAS, whatever our qualification process or acronym is, we need to think about level of engagement. It's the degree to which the customer or potential customer shares insider information with us and access to other people. That's what's going to determine our probability of winning. So,
I totally agree.
So think about engagement.
Yeah. So, only because you brought them all up except mine, neat selling is my favorite acronym. That's okay. You unpacked a lot in there, and I think it's great. I want to remind people that one, yes, we're going to give away some money today later on, and two, put your questions in the chat if you have a question for Tony. I want to make sure that we really hit on those things that attracted us to this, which is one, you said there are 3 things that a deal pushes and dies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What are those 3 things as you see them?
Yeah. So there's 3 things we can do something about, and there's a 4th thing. And these 4 things are really a catch-all for everything I've ever come across in why deals slip and stall and die. The first one is a lack of compelling commercial value in the mind of the real decision maker or the consensus team in the organization. So what happens with every deal of significant size is the person we're working with eventually goes to someone in their organization, the CFO, the CEO, whoever it is, and they say, hey, can you sign this off? Can you give me approval? Can you release the budget that I've been allocated for this initiative? And inevitably, the conversation goes along the lines of this. Hey, Mike, look, I've got 27 things on my desk I'm being asked to approve right now. we don't have the bandwidth or resources. It's not even about the money. We don't have the bandwidth and resources to do everything. There's a lot of change fatigue in the organization at the moment. Why this over everything else? And inevitably what happens is our coach, champion, whatever you want to call the person, advocate in there for the deal, they often botch the answer to that question.
Yep.
And what they need to be able to say is, this is essential because, and it pays for itself by. So
it's completely interesting, because this is the thing that I teach, and I know a lot of other people, but it's about the economic impact. What's this economic impact of solving this problem? And the piece that I always say, and it goes back to what you said, the 27 things on their desk, is, hey, what's the impact of this, which is sort of this hard cost, right? Like, how much time is it taking? How many people is it affecting? Sort of numberizing it, right? And then putting a dollar to that, and then say, by the way, if we reduce and save you X amount of time, what other things on that 27 to-do list gets done, and how do those affect your revenue, right? Like, that's the huge piece. Like, and people like to sort of call it ROI, but I don't like that phrase, because nobody believes the R, right? They only look at the I. And so if I paint it as economic impact, what's your economic impact? It's all about Tony's economic impact. It's got nothing to do with me, right? I really love that.
Yeah, and Richard, I'm with you 100%. Everything they're being asked to approve has ROI, and you're right. Nobody believes the exaggerated claim of the seller.
Right.
So the first reason is a lack of compelling commercial value. And yes, we need to sell to both head and heart, right? So if it's something that's got emotional impact, it's important, aligns to the vision of the CEO, or solve some raw wound that they're dealing with, something negative. So all of those things are good, but there has to be compelling commercial value. I'll talk about how we solve these problems a little later. The second reason deals typically stall and die is a lack of consensus. A lack of consensus with the stakeholders in the organization. It's easy to focus on the people that we think say yes, but there'll be others that can say no, right? So for example, maybe the IT department, need to do something, right, for us to be able to be implemented successfully. Or someone in the HR organization or someone in the finance team needs to be involved. And their leader says, hey, I've lost 2 or 3 people in my team during this great resignation period, don't you know? And I'm really struggling with bandwidth. I can see this is a good idea. I can see it's good for the organization and there's ROI, but I don't have the bandwidth in my team. Can we just defer this until Q2 next year? When I've filled those missing roles I've got. So if we don't have consensus, if there's any form of doubt, because if there's not compelling commercial reasons for going ahead, then people focus on the most trivial things that actually give them cause for pause, right? So doubt. Right. So compelling commercial value, consensus for the decision. And then the third reason that deals can slip, stall, and die is because we, and that's the royal we, us and the customer, didn't truly understand and align with their process for actually buying something, right? So there's something nasty pops up in their process. As we look at the run up to Christmas now, it's easy for someone to go away on leave, that, they were someone that had to sign it off. They're not sure when people come back. So they're the 3 things that we can typically have a degree of control over. And here's the fourth one. The fourth one is crap happens. Our supporter leaves, like our key supporter resigns and leaves the organization. The company gets acquired. They post bad results, right? There's just something happens outside of our control.
Right.
And what we know is the longer the deal drifts on, the higher the chance or probability that something nasty outside of our control will pop up, right? Yep. Like a new CIO joins the organization and says, we're freezing everything, or a new CEO joins, or a new CFO joins, even though they're not.
That CFO.
Yeah, it's, so these things outside of our control, we've got to recognize that time kills deals.
Yep.
So maybe we can talk about, well, what do you do about those 3 things?
Yeah, we should. I wanted to sort of do 2 things. So one, quickly, just rattle off the 4 real quick, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. What are they for folks who want to get notes?
Lack of compelling commercial value.
Right.
Lack of consensus, not understanding their process, and just something nasty happening.
Right.
like a key decision maker leaves or they get acquired.
Yep. So, and even Chris chimed in the chat that, like a global pandemic, right?
Yeah.
That's something
Yes.
super nasty.
Yes.
Appreciate that comment, Chris. Thank you so much.
It's a good one, Chris.
I want to obviously want to get to the other topics as well, but yeah, let's talk about those things. What can we do to better control them? And I also think from the context of, if I'm a leader, coaching my team to get this information as much as if I were an individual contributor and the advice you're going to give there. So sort of want to frame it up a couple of ways.
Okay, what I'd like to give everybody is 3 questions that you want to ask as early as possible when you engage a client. Because the sooner we deal with these issues, the faster our deal will progress and the less risk we'll have in being able to close. So let's imagine that a lead's come to us and the client is in the mode of comparing us with other options, right? Because the leads come to us and they're asking us their 763 questions. Maybe they've sent us a spreadsheet,
right?
Hey, Richard, could you fill in the spreadsheet with the 763 questions and send us your price? So we never want to appear to be uncooperative. So we say, sure, more than happy to do that, Mary. But do you mind if I ask? Here's question 1. What's happened inside the organization that's caused you to want to look at this right now? Now, so many sellers I work with will say, I got it. Hey, Mary, what's happened inside the organization that caused you to think that our company would be the best solution for you? And I go, no, that is not the question at all. That is a kludgy, manipulative salesperson's question that will damage you in the deal, right? But don't ask that one. Just, hey, what's happened inside the organization that's caused you to want to look at this now? Here's the second question. If you were to implement something, whether it was with us or somebody else, what improved results are you expecting, both for you in your role and for the organization? Now, the reason these 2 questions are really important is they get to the trigger event, the impact, and the business case of doing something. Because the biggest competitor we're really dealing with is the competitor of apathy, status quo, and do nothing. So we're trying to establish the commercial impact of change and whether this person is a decision maker. Because if there's no improved result that they need in implementing the project, then they've obviously just been asked to go and evaluate options. And the degree to which the person will share information back with us in response to that is the thing that's going to determine whether we win. And if they go, look, hey, Richard, I'm not even quite sure why you'd ask, buddy. Just fill in the spreadsheet and send me your price. And then what I recommend is you'd say, well, Mary, the reason I'm asking is I work with people going through this process all the time. And let's assume they're the project manager for the initiative, and as the project manager, something that's so common that I see is someone in your role will be tasked with going and implementing something. But if it's underfunded and doesn't have the right level of support in the organization, the project's in trouble right out of the gate. I'd just like to work with you to help you make sure that you've got the right level of executive commitment, funding, and resources behind this. That's actually where your biggest risk is. I know right now you're trying to figure out who would be the right vendor or partner to work with. And I know you need to make the right decision with who you select, but 95% of your risk is in, does it have executive commitment behind it, beyond just a sponsor, and is it funded and resourced the right way? So let me help you validate the business case. Whether you buy from us or not, I'm still more than happy to help you. And then you get to the third question. So Mary, where do you see the risks in getting this done successfully? So the 3 questions are, what's happened inside the organization that's caused you to want to look at this? What improved results are you looking for, both for you and your role in the organization? And where do you see the risks? Yep. Because our job in selling is to help the client have their own epiphany that they need to be creating the right comparisons in their mind, not the wrong ones. So the wrong comparison is, let's compare Richard Harris's IP and product and services and rates with other options. That's what they want to do. We want them to create a different comparison. What's the cost of inaction, of staying in current state, of doing nothing, compared with working with Richard to get that problem solved.
This aligns 1,000% with everything I do, right?
Yeah.
For me, even wearing my shirt that says "Earn the right to ask questions." There's a moment before you ask these questions, but these are the questions you ask, and each of those three questions, particularly the first one, "What's happening now," is the question I encourage everybody uses, that transition statement from "Hey, how are you?" blah blah blah. You're sort of what I call a respect contract. So I love those moments, and I love what you're saying. So of course it's telling me I should have written 3 books a while ago too. So
well, and Richard, the other thing this highlights too, right, is that there's no new truth. Like you and I've both known this and discovered this a long time ago, right?
Yeah, nothing has changed in sales since about Mesopotamia, as best I can tell.
Yeah, and the other thing that's so important here is we want to be conveying the right intent. We don't want the buyer to feel like we're qualifying them. We're giving them the Spanish Inquisition. We're trying to qualify them to see whether they're worthy of our time. We want to avoid all of that. The intent we're wanting to convey is, hey, I'm all about trying to figure out whether we're the right fit for each other, and help you de-risk this initiative that you're responsible for in the organization. Whether you buy from us or not is fine. If we're not a good fit, I'll bow out. I'll even maybe recommend who I think you should be working with. But let's take the risk out of this thing that you're trying to drive, because customers are often their own worst enemy, right? They treat the supplier like they're a commodity, and they keep them at arm's length, when the truth is vendor selection, although important, is not where the majority of their risk is.
Yeah. So it's interesting because even our leadership treats us like a commodity. So internally, so the pain comes from both sides. Couple of things. So our good friend, I think John Barrows, really good friend of mine.
John Barrows is brilliant.
Yeah, and one of his favorite lines that I've really picked up on lately is qualifying is about us and discovery is about them. So qualifying is very much stuff you can do quickly, and in my mind, you can actually do qualifying by doing better discovery. Right? Like I don't need to know how many salespeople you have on your team. I can probably go to LinkedIn and figure it out, and I'll still have the conversation, even if you've only got 3 people, because who knows? Like it's it's just silly that people sort of go through this grill and drill of things. Well, thank you so much. So I really like that piece. My next question is, and I got to pull them back up, talking about what leaders should manage specifically, because you can't manage people, right? You can manage a process, and you can't control people. What do you want the leaders who are here to understand that they could maybe do better, or hopefully for some of these leaders confirm they're doing it right all along?
Yeah, so a really good friend of mine is Jason Jordan. He co-authored a book with Michelle Van Zeller called Cracking the Sales Management Code.
I love that book. I know Jason.
Yeah. I actually think it's the best book ever written on sales management, because it's really practical. And the thing that Jason says in the book, and I agree 100%, is what you've said, Richard. You can't manage people really. You can't manage results or outcomes, right? So if you think about, what I want is a result. Well, okay, to achieve that result, you're going to need to achieve some objectives. Right. So if you want to do, I'll make something up. Let's say that you want to do 130% of the target. You go, okay, well, I can't really manage that. That's the result I want. So what's the objective or the objectives that I need to hit if I'm going to do that? You go, okay, well, I'll make this up. Every business will be different, but I'm going to need 3.7 times that number in qualified pipeline 9 weeks out. From when I want to hit that number for the quarter. Again, you should know your own numbers inside your business. Numbers are critically important. So you go, okay, so the objective is that level of pipeline coverage with quality deals. Great. Then what are the activities? So we've got result, objective, activities. The activities are the things that we can manage, right? So we want people focused on the objective, right? That'll end up delivering the result. And then we can manage the activities and the way that people execute. So for example, if we're using, there's lots of products that do this, but if we use something like Gong, that records calls, then one of the activities we can manage is listening into calls that people were doing with them, doing a debrief, enabling them to coach themselves and actually listening back. Hey, this was a strong buying signal. It sailed right past because you were fixated on the next question you were going to ask. So we can do that coaching. So we need to think about what are the activities I need to, that I need to manage. And in the world of this, it'd be, well, I need to be doing, whatever it is, or my people need to be doing, 90 minutes or 90-minute time blocked outbound sessions. They need to do it effectively using the combo prospecting technique where they're pattern interrupting. They need to start leading with the phone rather than passive engagement in LinkedIn and email. And then what you do is you can manage, do they have the time blocks? You can say to people, show me your list for your time block tomorrow morning. Do you have phone numbers? Do you have email addresses? You can do debriefs with them out, afterwards. So the thing for leaders is be very clear about the objectives you need to achieve to hit the result. And then what are the activities you're going to manage with people? And then my last piece on this, in the same way that prospects don't like being qualified by a seller, no seller likes to be sales managed by their boss. So what you want is the seller having their own epiphany about what they need to commit to. So for example, a sales IQ, we've created a sales success plan calculator where the seller sets their own objectives, then they work at average deal size, cycle time, the typical ratios as you move through the top of funnel process to get a good qualified deal. Then what are your win rates? And it just reverse calculates for them what the activity levels need to be for these time blocked outbound sessions. So they do this themselves and go, holy crap, I need to be doing 7 outbound sessions a week or 3, or even if it's 2. Right. So then they've identified what they need to do. And now the manager is saying, hey, I'm committed to your success. You've identified this is what you need to do. When are you going to get it booked in? I want to do a debrief with you after every one to see how we can be better supporting you. So again, your intent is all about the salesperson's success, not here's my flamethrower in one hand and my forecast in the other, give me more revenue.
Yeah, it's interesting because I interpret that, what you said, as, I want to empower my team with the data and then go to them and say, how can I help you get there? What do you need from me? Do you want more coaching sessions? I'll give you more, right? So I really like that because to your point, it's not micromanaging. I want to ask you a question completely off topic, well, on topic, but different. One of the things I've noticed, and I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm happy to throw myself under the bus. The level of coaching that I think millennials and Gen Z desire, I wouldn't even say require, it's desire. I would have felt like micromanaged. Do you know what I mean? Like having something like a Gong or a Chorus or any of these tools would have I remember, when we first were going to put in, what was it, Goldmine? I was like, oh my God, they're going to see everything I'm doing. Right. For those of you who don't know, just Google it. It's an old CRM. So
like ACT.
Yeah. So like Lotus Notes. But it's interesting because I think the generations, and it's one of the reasons I like working with the younger generation, because they're so much more spongy. They want to learn, which I guess that means they like to listen to me so I can talk. But do you see the same thing? Do you see this sort of generational divide on this level of management? Because I see so many managers who suck at it. They're just not good.
Yeah, Richard, I agree with you. And there's also another problem. The other problem that exacerbates the reality of what you just talked about is that there's fewer sales managers per rep in organizations. So the management layer is being stretched thinner, and they're being burdened with a whole lot of overhead and manage up tasks all of the time. So in the good old days, one of the primary roles of a sales manager was to be a coach of their people. Right. And you'd have smaller teams where the manager was the coach. Whereas
what's
now
the good ratio then? If you're working with an organization, what do you say manager to rep?
I would say 8 reps per manager, would be the biggest you'd want it to be if you believe that coaching is a pivotal and important role for the sales leader.
And that's the piece, because so often they are like, well, can't you just do it all? Like they have no clue. Right.
Or we've got a sales enablement department, and we've got 1 million online e-learning courses that we expect people to do. Right. So here's my really provocative thing about sales management. I believe that for almost all organizations, if you look at the revenue chain inside their own business, the weak link in that revenue chain is sales management. That's the weak link.
Yeah.
Because the degree to which the sales manager enforces and also leads with good hygiene, culture, and accountability and coaching is the degree to which there'll be good execution. So for example, we all know that unless you have clarity about your ideal customer profile, right? So in other words, you're targeting, where there's good product market fit and highest propensity to buy. Unless you're engaging on the basis of warm introductions and referrals and trigger events for context in conversations, unless you're building conversations all about that person's opportunity to drive improved results in their role, rather than conversations about us and what we do, unless people are disciplined in the daily habitual activity of consistently building pipeline, unless they're creating progression in conversations, like I could go on and on, right? But unless these things are happening, there is not going to be success. And the sales manager's job is to keep removing excuses and roadblocks until all that's left is no more excuses and accountability.
Sometimes it's the C-level that's the roadblock, which I think, you and I both know. Got a question from Shafi. Shafi, I hope I pronounced your name right. Please correct me if not. But go ahead, and I know it's in the chat, but go ahead. We like to create some engagement here.
Yes, Richard, that was excellent pronunciation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, Tony Hughes. So my question is regarding the activities that is defined by the organizations and proven to be successful. And now, how do you manage that and also have reps have their own autonomy to implement things and think outside the box?
Yeah, so it's not a case, Shafi, and thank you for the question, Shafi. It's not a question of either. I really think it's both. So I know when I got my first ever job in selling, I was so awful at it. I'd never worked in sales. But the very first thing I did is I asked my boss and others, and I've got to tell you, I struggled to go find the answer, but I was persistent. I wanted to find out what are the metrics for being successful in this role. Let's forget all the magic of, oh, he's a great seller, he's got the gift of the gab, right? Like, what are the activity levels? So how many prospecting calls, how many proposals, how many demonstrations, what are the metrics for success? And then once I found out what those numbers were, I increased them by 50% for me, because I thought I'm not as good as these other people. So I went and found out what are the metrics for proven success. So everybody should go and find out what that is for their industry and their company. Then the next thing is every company should have a well-defined sales process. So if we think, okay, well, I need to do discovery well. Okay, well, what are the things we need to know? We can't do a good proposal unless we have all of the right information. What are the typical objections that we'll be faced with, and how can I position in a way that avoids the objection? How do I respond if it just pops up? So there's things that are just true that we need to know, but then what we need to layer onto this is our own creativity and personality. Now, if someone says to me, I don't believe in using the phone, my personal point of view is, well, I don't care about what you believe. If you refuse
get out, I'm leaving.
I'm
out of here.
Refuse to use the phone as a seller, you're not going to be successful.
Yep.
If you're just passively grooming your LinkedIn profile and publishing content all day, thinking that the world will beat a path to your door with leads, you're deluded. So, like, there's just things that don't work, right? If you call people up and say, hi, Mary, it's Shafi from XYZ, we're the global market leader, and you start talking about yourself, the law of selling is that when we talk about us and what we do, we invite comparison with competition, questions about price, and we get delegated away. Yep. And I don't care what the seller's opinion is. That's how the world is. So don't call up and talk about yourself. Call up and say, hey, Mary, John suggested I give you a call. I noticed XYZ is happening in your role. Hey, the reason I'm calling is I think there could be an opportunity for you. And then you talk about a benefit for them, a way they could drive improved results in the role. So that it's having customer-centric conversations, turning up with a point of view, having done some research, talk the language of leaders, which is results. Don't be a waffler. Like, these things are just true. And if a seller says, yeah, but I like to call people up and ask them how their weekend was and do 10 minutes of personal chit chat, as a way of earning the right to ask the question, I'll say, well, yes, we need to be friendly. If that works for you, great. But, there's sellers are really busy. They're not looking for another friend in their life from the world of selling. I really think you need to tighten things up. So use your own personality, but honor the laws of what works would be my advice.
I agree with you. And I love that line. They're not looking for another friend. I run into this too, though, with people, and I will coach more towards your style, but I'll also say the same thing. Look, if you're hitting your numbers and you're doing it your way, don't change just because Richard walked or Tony walked in the door, right? Like, I don't need you got something that works for you. And then, the other piece of advice, and I actually learned this from Scott, was if you're going to try something new, only try something new after you've accomplished your one for the day. So if your job is to set a meeting a day, don't try something new till you set that first meeting. Because otherwise you're going to shift and you're not going to know what to say. You're not going to know how to say it. You got to work it out and iron it out. So make sure you take that, heck yeah, the pressure's off for this one little piece. So now I'm going to try something new. And I think John put into the chat a little bit about, A/B testing every single thing. Right? So I think that's super huge. I want to go over to I got to find you, Bharat, on the channel. I'm going to have
actually I can see the question here. So Bharat, would you like to unmute and ask, or I can just read it out?
I'd let you unmute, Bharat, if you want.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity here. So basically, my question today is regarding training or coaching of reps. Since different reps come from different backgrounds and different organizations, some learn different kind of sales methodologies, whether it be spin selling and solution selling, or maybe any other kind of methodology. So when it comes to sales manager, it becomes challenging to kind of understand what the experience has been in the past for that specific person, how to coach them in an effective manner. So say there are 5 reps, each rep comes with a different sales methodology. So understanding that and coaching them. So that becomes a little tricky or a burden to the sales manager. So how to make that more proficient and effective for that specific sales manager?
Bharat, that's a really great question, and thank you. So the first thing is we all need to recognize that there's a difference between sales methodology and sales process. Okay, so as an organization, you'll have a sales process that you run aligned with the way that people buy. What's laid onto that is a methodology for doing things. So to sort of give you an example here, if someone says, well, I use spin, well, the first thing is spin is not really a process. Spin is a methodology for thinking about types of questions. And what you don't do is you don't go, let me ask you a situation question, then a problem question, then an implication question, then a needs payoff, which is really the value or the benefit question. If you're just going SPIN, you're just annoying the crap out of the poor prospect, right? But there's things about selling. If you think about challenger, for example, so challenger selling, value selling, solution selling, insight selling, they all speak to the same thing, which is that we need a point of view that we take to the customer, researched, credible point of view about how they could be improving results in their role for the organization. And whether you're trained on challenger selling, value selling, whether you're trained on Miller Hyman, Taz, it's just a principle that we need to honor. So it's great if people have been trained, and we don't want to confuse people, but there's common threads. Richard's got his own methodology. I've got my own strategic selling, RSVP selling. I won't bore you with what that's all about, but it's a methodology for managing deal risk, right? So making sure that you're upping the win rate in the deal. But I say to someone, if you've been trained on Taz or Miller Hyman, great. My RSVP questions layer over the top.
I say this all the time. Here's what I'm hearing you say, and how I encourage people to think about it is the way you talk to your prospects and the way you ask questions should be designed to make them paint a picture of pain.
Yeah.
Right? So all the way back to what Tony said at the beginning is, what's happening in the organization that's prompting this conversation? Well, now there's a picture in their head, right?
Yeah.
And, I'm sure, Tony, you probably get the same thing of like, hey, Richard, we need help with prospecting, negotiation, and closing. I'm like, okay, well, where is it falling apart in the negotiation? Give me an example. So now all of a sudden we're making them live in that moment, right? In a non-manipulative way, but it helps us really understand what they're trying to do. So I love that piece. And then the other thing I'll say around the process and methodology and philosophy and all those things is that one, it's important to have one that's a common language. The challenge I see, and I'm not a fan, I don't tell people who hire me to go and rip out whatever they're using and put in neat selling, because the deal is that neat selling is not going to be any better, because the problem with the first one was nobody coached to it. It was never refined enough, and then nobody coached to it. So you're going to have the same problem whether you put in RSVP or neat or anything else. So I always make sure that we talk about that. And then to your point, I call it bolting on, right, Tony? Like RSVP bolts on to Miller Hyman. So does neat selling. It bolts on to Challenger and all those things. So I completely agree with you on all this stuff. I want to move on to our third piece of this conversation. And again, folks, feel free to put questions in there. And then at the end, we're gonna give away some money. So what do we want them to be better at, right? So we've talked about they need to have this, know your numbers, have your plan, right? We can coach them to be better at that. What other kinds of things can we coach them at that you see from a sales leader perspective?
One of the things that's so important is sellers need to be able to tell great true stories that make other customers the hero of the story, not us. So most sellers think, yes, I need to tell stories, but almost every one of their stories has them as the hero of the story, them or their company. We want the customer to be the hero. So if you're going to adopt an insight-led approach to selling, one where we've got a point of view, a worthwhile point of view for the customer, we need to be able to quickly tell these great true stories on how others have moved the needle on results. So one of the best things you can do as a seller is really work hard, dig deep, go have a look at your company case studies, go talk to your customer success or account manager, people in your own business about the clients that are happy, referenceable clients, and ask them what happened in the organization that started them down the path that led to us. What was their business case that they put up internally? How have they moved the needle on results? Where were their biggest risks as they implemented? If you can understand those things, you're now equipping yourself to be far more consultative in how you sell. Because until the customer is first convinced of the need to change, and Richard, you talk rightly about pain. Pain, as we both know, can also manifest as they know that they're not benefiting from the positive, brighter future that they think they could have as well, right? So they think, man, every month we're staying in current state, look at the market share we're missing out on, the revenue we're missing out on. So it's really important that there's just a compelling commercial reason. And that's in essence how you want to build your consultative approach. You want to get really good at co-creating the business case for change, helping them secure consensus within the organization. That is what makes you a really good consultative seller. And we need to earn the right to have those engagements. I love, Richard, your whole thing of earn the right. We need to earn the right based on our worthwhile point of view, not based on disingenuous rapport building and friending strategies.
No, I completely agree. Want to give one more shout out to anyone with a customer. And I'm going to put a couple things over in the chat. So first thing is, I promised that we would do this. Interesting, because nobody ever does this with one of our sponsors. They asked me to post something from Outreach so that people could take a look at it. So thanks to our sponsors, Outreach, Reggie.ai, Salesforce for Sales, and Vidyard. We appreciate everything that they do to help us bring these great conversations to fruition. And then I also want to let people know, and if you are looking at customer success as something, we're going to be doing something with Nick Mehta in let's see, October 27th. So I'll put a link into the chat there as well. And we will love to see you there was speaking about customer success. And then of course, I'm also going to put Tony's and my LinkedIn profiles in as well, so that you can do that. Follow us if you like. So Tony, where can people get a hold of your books these days before we do the final wrap up and the contest money.
Yeah, so if you just go to Amazon and look for Tech Powered Sales, co-authored that with Justin Michael, and also Combo Prospecting. These two books are all about solving the top of funnel pipeline problem. You can also find me at salesiqglobal.com. Hey, Richard, I'd really encourage you to maybe get my co-founder partner, Luigi Pristinenzi, on at some stage to interview.
Okay.
He could really talk well about this issue of style, because Louis and I've got very different selling styles, and he adopted some of these principles that I'm really strong about. Like, let's dial back the friending and rapport building, get to the point faster. And he was quite uncomfortable with that. He is a phenomenal seller, and it took his incredible results to a whole new, even better level. So it speaks to this issue of, hey, look, I've got my style. Why should I change? Yeah, it'd be really.
Yeah, send me an intro to him. I'll be happy to do it. All right, here's how we do the contest winner. I close my eyes and I roll my hands around and I touch the screen. And I hope I say it right. Clemetta Butler, you just won $300. So stay on here for a second when we hang up, and I'll get your Venmo or however you want to get it. So thanks again, everybody. I really appreciate you showing up and giving us the time. Tony, thank you. It's always enlightening to see and work with you. So best to you and everybody's family as we start to hit the holiday season, crazily enough. So thanks everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, Clemetta.